everybody. Welcome to AWS On Air. We're right back, immediately back, and here to talk about probably one of the most important challenges literally affecting everyone on the planet, climate change and the climate crisis, right? So I'm Grobelny, one of your hosts here for AWS On Air. I'm going to turn it over to my friends here from Earthrise and Mary too from AWS to introduce themselves. And we're going to be talking about Climate Trace. So we'll hear from them and then we'll hear what Climate Trace is and what's that all about. Mary, how about you kick us off? Give us a quick intro.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the opportunity. And we're always excited to come to AWS On Air and talk about sustainability. So thanks for the invitation, especially at reInvent. Great opportunity to talk about what our partners are doing and how they're supporting our customers, organizations around the world, as well as governments, get an understanding of how do we move forward, right? And how do we take action today? And so I'm excited about having Climate Trace with us. My role at AWS is I have this great honor of looking across the world at the organizations that are using AWS technologies to build solutions that further sustainability initiatives. So Earthrise, together with Climate Trace, are one of those organizations. So looking forward to having them talk about what they've been up to and some of the exciting news coming out of COP in the last couple of weeks.
Bronwyn, how about you next?
Hi, thank you for having us. Yeah, Dan and I are super excited to be here. We work at Earthrise Media. We built the Climate Trace platform and everything that you see kind of on the climatetrace.org. My role is that I built the product, work with the product team. Super fortunate to get to play that really critical role.
And Dan, we'll wrap up with your intro and then get into questions.
Great. I'm Dan Hammer, and I work at Earthrise Media alongside Bronwyn. It's a 501c3 nonprofit project where we build digital products for other environmental organizations. And unlike Bronwyn, who actually does things, I just pontificate and evangelize.
Sounds like me, Dan. You and I have that in common. That's
you used to do things.
It's a good business to be in. Now, this is a topic near and dear to my own heart. And one of the things that really stood out to me about Climate Trace specifically was it's a lot about carbon emissions and the unexpected places that carbon emissions are generated from. So, for example, I personally am a vegetarian for that very reason, right? Like it's not kind of well known. Necessarily, it's getting more and more well known that raising animals is a large contributor to a broad carbon footprint. So, Dan, how about we start with you? What is Climate Trace, and you just want to give us how Earthrise and Climate Trace? Bronwyn gave us a quick kind of segue into how the two are connected, but maybe you can give us some more details there.
Well, yes, I'll give you a little bit more details about how they're connected. So Earthrise builds the digital or downstream product. So we don't actually assemble the data associated with this project. That's built by a coalition that's led by Al Gore and Watt Time, a project to one of the founding member of Climate Trace. Once that data has been assembled by groups who specialize, both for-profits and nonprofits, in, say, like emissions from rice paddies or emissions from cattle operations, we build the application programming interfaces, as well as the site that you can interact with on at climatetrace.org. We do that for a lot of different partners, including the Bezos Earth Fund or 350.org or the UN. This is one of our favorite projects that we've worked on so far. We also have this additional and smaller role as providing the sites or the locations of waste, which is also a contributor to greenhouse gases. And we're not entirely sure how much, and that's part of the problem and the reason why Climate Trace exists. But waste being like plastic waste sites, where we produce the locations of all waste sites globally through Global Plastics Watch, which feeds into Climate Trace as one of the preferred partners. Bronwyn has some additional talking points around the specific emission sites.
That's part of what really struck me when I was reading through Climate Trace's site to prep for this interview. It is incredibly difficult to figure out exactly where I love you called out can't see the gases, right? You can't just like visibly see what's coming off of these various industries and places that are creating these emissions. But Bronwyn, as the product owner, how did you come about getting all of this data into one place? Collecting that much data has to be a large challenge, I'm sure.
I mean, yes, you absolutely nailed it. I mean, at the release that we put out at COP27, the total number of individual emission sources is about just under 80,000, from power and steel, oil and gas production, shipping, aviation, cattle farming, like you mentioned, basically every conceivable way that humans are producing emissions. So how are we doing that, right? Like if it's not being done before, why is it being done now? The short is that like we need a lot of sensors on a lot of satellites, and we hear a lot about rockets going up and satellites going up and taking lots of pictures, and this is a massive accelerator of also the climate movement, right? So that we train a lot of models because we get a big mess of data that we have to make sense of. And so it's kind of those three things, right? We need the sensors plus the satellites plus the AI, and we just haven't had this before, right? That we know that global greenhouse gases are released each year, right? It's not new. We've been monitoring it for years. But the question has always been, where is it coming from? And if we can't point to the individual sources, the specific factories, the farms, the refineries, then how are we going to design those as specific initiatives and policies to reduce the emissions? So it's that kind of accelerator that has gotten us into the position where Climate Trace can exist. And I'd say like one of the big things that I heard a lot of this past month when we launched this latest release of individual facilities is that it's enabled by the sensor technology. Like sensors are very honest. Instead of asking emitters to describe how much they emit and then tallying that up, right, in a very like self-directed way, we are looking through observation and remote sensing and having like an independent observation of the emissions, and that's a real distinguishing factor of kind of what Climate Trace is bringing to the market.
I hear a lot of like engineering-driven methods here. I hear number one, data-driven decision making, right? Like, so we didn't have the data to make fully formed decisions on how to deal with climate change. So you all went out and are collecting that data. Great engineering methodology. Two, trust but verify, right? Like that is a long-held security standard, right? So Dan, we've got people coming from all kinds of backgrounds here at reInvent. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in IT as you've worked on Climate Trace in sustainability?
The main one is that environmental management is no longer a side project. There's this urgent interest in environment, which includes climate change. It's not limited to climate change, but certainly it's a keynote of the environment. It's accelerated. That interest has accelerated over the past 5 years. And so the value of knowing about the environment, data about how the environment is changing, is tracking with that urgent interest. And it's not just social value anymore. It's not for in the world of the social sector or nonprofits, that there's real market value in knowing more about the natural environment than we did yesterday. And so with that increased interest is also new requirements of environmental data, new features that are required of environmental data. And so it's no longer sufficient just to publish data from black box models. It just won't get used to any real effect. The data, if it's one of those papers that just gets published, or it's in a repository alongside a single sort of publication, it remains there. It sits idly in that peer-reviewed publication. that these are becoming data products, like operational data products, where people are going to allocate resources against real problems based off of that information that has a different set of requirements. Most notably, one of them is that the user interaction with the source data is becoming more and more important, that it's transparency, not just into like a final output, but into the provenance of that information. So the way in which that data is stored, and we surface different points of the production process is becoming a necessity. It's not just a nice to have anymore here.
We're short on time, Dan. I'm really sorry to have to cut you off. This is a vitally important topic. I really hate to do it, but in 30 seconds or less, anything either of you want to leave the audience with on how to interact with the data? Any calls to action here that we can give the audience?
In lieu of doing a quick demo, I would say please go to climatetrace.org. We built this like incredibly intuitive map at climatetrace.org/map, and go work with the data. It's designed to be like touched and used and sliced so that, by country and sector and gases, so that how it fits within your organization. Use the data, hit us up, and let us know how it works for you.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn, Dan, and Mary, for joining us. This, like I said, very, very personal thing to me. Very happy to see the work that you all are doing. And go check out climatetrace.org. We will be right back with an interview with one of our leaders. Stick around.